Empathy is one of the rarest things a person can develop. The capacity to feel what someone else is carrying, to take their experience seriously, to respond to pain with genuine care rather than strategy. It takes years to build. It makes you someone worth knowing. It also makes you visible to a specific type of person. Not because empathetic people are naive. Most of them are acutely perceptive. They read rooms well, sense shifts in energy, notice what others miss. The vulnerability isn't in failing to see. It's in what happens after they see. An empathetic person feels the pull to respond, to help, to bridge the distance between someone's pain and their relief. That impulse is genuine and good. And certain people learn, consciously or not, to position themselves precisely at that point. The first thing an emotional manipulator locates is your threshold for guilt, not through a direct test, through observation. They watch how you respond when someone is visibly disappointed in you. Whether you move toward that disappointment to resolve it or hold your position. Whether an expression of hurt on their face changes your answer. Most empathetic people were raised in environments where someone else's emotional state was their responsibility. A parent whose mood determined the atmosphere of the house. A relationship where love felt conditional on managing the other person's feelings. The lesson learned early was, when someone is in pain and you could do something about it, doing nothing is a kind of cruelty. That lesson was the manipulator's entry point before they even arrived. The mechanism itself is straightforward once you can see it. It begins with vulnerability. Shared early, shared specifically, shared in a way that feels like trust, but moves faster than trust actually develops. A difficult childhood, a wound that hasn't healed, a fear they've never told anyone else. The empathetic person receives this and responds the way empathetic people do, with care, with presence, with the beginning of a felt sense of responsibility toward this person's pain. That felt responsibility is the lever. Once it exists, behavior that would otherwise register as unacceptable gets filtered through it. An outburst becomes understandable, given what they've been through. A broken commitment becomes forgivable, given how much they're carrying. A boundary violation becomes complicated because they're clearly struggling, and who would abandon someone in that state? The empathetic person isn't blind to what's happening. They're managing two contradictory pieces of information simultaneously. This behavior is not acceptable, and this person is in pain. And the second piece keeps outweighing the first. That's not a failure of perception. That's empathy being used as a counterweight to judgment. There's a particular pattern that appears in almost every version of this dynamic. When you attempt to address the behavior, calmly, clearly, with full awareness that this conversation is necessary, the focus shifts, not to what you raised, but to how you raised it, your tone, your timing. The fact that bringing this up now, when they're already overwhelmed, says something about your sensitivity toward them. Suddenly, you're defending your right to have the concern rather than discussing the concern itself. This is sometimes called DAVO: defend, attack, reverse victim, and offender. The terminology matters less than recognizing the experience. You entered the conversation carrying a legitimate grievance and left it somehow holding an apology. For an empathetic person, this is particularly effective, because the question, "Was I being unkind?" lands with real weight. They'll examine it honestly because that's who they are. And that honest examination, that genuine willingness to consider their own culpability, gets used as a reason the original issue never has to be addressed. None of this requires the manipulator to be consciously plotting. Some are, many aren't. What looks like strategy is often a survival pattern developed in their own complicated history, a learned understanding that vulnerability generates care, that guilt is more reliable than honest communication, that keeping someone slightly off balance maintains proximity. They may have no language for what they're doing. They may genuinely experience themselves as the victim of your emotional unavailability. That doesn't change what the dynamic costs you. Understanding the origin of a behavior doesn't obligate you to absorb its consequences indefinitely. What changes when you see this clearly isn't suspicion. It isn't the decision to close off or protect yourself by feeling less. What changes is the moment between their expression of pain and your response to it. That moment gets longer. There's space now between the impulse to relieve their discomfort and the action of doing so. In that space, a different question becomes available, not how can I fix this for them, but is this mine to fix? Sometimes it is. Genuine pain deserves a genuine response. Empathy doesn't become a liability by being used. It becomes a liability by being the only thing you consult. When judgment and empathy operate together, when you can hold both, this person is in pain and this behavior is not acceptable without one dissolving the other, the lever stops working. Not because you became harder, because you became more complete. Your empathy was never the problem. It was always a precision instrument. It just needed the rest of you operating alongside it. Your clarity, your limits, your willingness to let someone sit with the discomfort you didn't create and aren't responsible for resolving. The people who deserve your empathy will never ask you to choose between it and your own dignity. That distinction, once you feel it clearly, does more than any list of red flags ever could.